Club. We picked up the Star Club and the Fountain. That's where we left off.
Yeah, they picked somebody that they liked from a visiting group, even a visiting group, and again amongst themselves they decided who they're going to throw in the fountain. Well, I got picked to throw in the fountain. After I got thrown in the fountain, they brought me towels and they were all laughing and they brought me. I didn't drink, but they brought me beer and wine and all that kind of stuff, and they became great friends with the band, especially Crazy Chris, who was the lead singer for the Searchers, and we kind of knew that was going to be the wave. No, this is '62. The Beatles were performing there, but not the same time. They were popular around there, but they weren't international yet. Brian Epstein came in with the song "Love, Love Me Do" and played it for us and said, "We know you're with Decca. Will you take it? And I'd like to see them signed to an American company." So when we got back, to make a long story short, Bill played it for Decca, and Decca said, "No, they sound like the Everly Brothers. We don't need another Everly Brothers." So they missed the Beatles. But then, of course, I don't know that we got meeting the Beatles, and did we get as far as meeting the Beatles in Manchester?
We touched on it, but that's when the camera ran out of juice. So we should pick up probably where you were in Manchester. My understanding, Bill Haley was in Manchester, touring at the same time as the Beatles.
Our show was earlier than theirs, so we said, let's go over and see them, because they were already a big hit in the States, which surprised me. They really didn't know how big they were.
And this is 64.
64. I mean, they knew they were gaining popularity, but they didn't know the point, how big they were. George Harrison was the nicest of all of them. He really talked and said that, if it wasn't for what you call the founders of rock, us and, and Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard and Bo Diddley, that's who they really admired. They admired that. So, and then the next friendly was Paul McCartney, and he gave us the same thing. John Lennon was nice, but because I got the feeling that because he had to be nice. And Ringo Starr was like, I think somewhere else, I have no idea. He said hello, and he was, I don't know what he was doing. I mean, he didn't hang around all that much. But I got a chance. I have an autographed picture of them, so that was great. But they seemed very nice. All the English groups were really, really, really nice.
But there was a real changing of the guards, because I was under the impression that a lot of the guys, Little Richard, Bill Haley, didn't write their own material as much. So it was the real switching gears as far as the revolution of the singer-songwriter-performer, which Bill Haley kind of kicked off, but he didn't have the material to back it up.
No, right. It didn't, and I think Bill trusted the so-called establishment too much.
And the establishment was the Brill Building?
The establishment would be like agents and record companies, to be honest. Well, the American record companies and publishing companies, he had his own publishing company.
Bill Haley.
Yeah. But some of the songs that he didn't write naturally weren't in his publishing company. But they were fairly honest, and he got royalties, a lot of royalties. But when he went outside the United States to Mexico, even though we had #1 hits, they were not honest. They said, "Oh, our expenses were more than you made and needed platinum records." How can the expenses be more than you made?
But wouldn't his songs be monitored on radio stations in Mexico? They would keep a log of how many times they played a Bill Haley song or anyone's song.
Yeah, they did, but you have to understand that in Latin America and Mexico, it's all paid off. Everything, anything. I got stopped by. I got stopped in Mexico, and I made a wrong turn. And they have two police. It's crazy. They have police that monitor the traffic and police that monitor the pedestrians. Don't know why, but I got stopped, and luckily with me was Bill Haley's wife, and she told me under her breath, pay off the cop. And he was telling me I've got to go, I had to show up in court, and this was really a violation and everything. And so she spoke to him in Spanish and a little off to the side, and all of a sudden he just said, go. In order to get on a telephone in your home in Mexico, this is in the 60s now, I don't know how it is now, you had to pay off the phone company. Otherwise, they say there's a waiting list so long you won't get a phone for a year. But somehow, if you pay off somebody, you get a phone in a week.
Unless the money went to via slightly
And
wrong
that's
people.
and that's just the way it worked. And that's just the way it worked in the Latin American countries.
Must have been very frustrating to perform in circumstances like that.
Yeah, and we went back the second time. We were there more than once, but the second time, Bill thought he had an ironclad contract, or he was going to get paid this time, instead of the promoter running off with everything, and we had to sneak across the border into the United States, literally sneak in the middle of the night, because they took everything, took our passports, everything. It was in the bus, So we had nothing to get across. So the guy said, well, I'll get you into the United States, and he did. We went in a boxcar. And it moved during the night, and in the morning we were in California. So we got off and went to the Americans and said, "This is what happened," and they didn't really think much of it. They said, "Okay, you're Americans. We can see you're not Mexican," So we proved we were, but the second time we went, he thought he had an ironclad contract with the agency, and for some stupid reason he used the same agency. Don't ask me why. Peichi, his name was Peichi, and he was a black belt in judo, so Bill wouldn't fight him. So on the opening show, we were at a big place, and Peichi comes on stage and calls Bill up on the stage, and all the photographers are taking pictures, and his wife is standing next to me, Martha, going like, "Oh no, get off the stage," and Bill's looking like this, "Get off the stage." So he came off, and she literally slaps him, says, "You know what you just did?" Says, "What? You donated all your salary on this tour to some orphanage, and of course the promoter's going to get most of it. You just," he said, "but now it's all over the papers. It's all over you can't go back on that." Luckily the band got paid again. He got screwed. So, it's just, no fond memories of Mexico.
Yeah, I can see.
And of course I was telling Lee this. There was a song that was number one in Mexico called Tampico Twist. We were the kings of twist. We beat Chubby Checker, and it was number one, right? So I look at the album that comes out, the song. Franny Beecher, a songwriter, I didn't. So Franny Beecher,
Camptown Races rewrites. The Camptown Races rewrite.
No. That was. I don't know if we got into that. No, that was my own song that I wrote. There was actually a rip-off, sort of the riff of What I Say.
Yes.
Doom, doo, 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 doom, doom, doo, doo. It was a riff, so it wasn't part of the melody of the song. But after that, we came back and signed with a little recording company in Philadelphia, and the owner was a car dealership. And he had a recording company. And Patty Labell was part of that. So I met Patty Labell, but we were sitting there trying to think up songs, so finally said, "Why don't you just take nursery rhymes or whatever and change the words?" And so we did Mary Had a Little Lamb, and everything was stupid. One day we were going to the recording studio, and we went up South Street. And on the corner, there was a guy with long hair and wearing the colored beads. And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "That's a hippie." It's the first one I ever saw. And we're talking 62, 63. I said, "Hippie." So we're sitting between takes, and I did not know the take was running. And I started Camptown Races, but I said, "Where do all the hippies meet?" South Street, where the dancing is meet. You have East Street, West Street, North Avenue. South Street's the one street to have it, it's with you. I didn't know they were recording it. It came out by the Orlons about 6 weeks later, and they're playing it. I said, "That's my song."
Oh my God.
And I went back to the record company and said, "You didn't write that." So what do you mean I didn't write that? Don't you remember I was sitting there just playing the guitar and singing? We were having fun. I was making a joke. No, I don't remember that. Obviously. And I said, "Well, they wouldn't give me the tape." And but that's the way the music business is. It's a highly, what's the word? The mafia has a lot to do with it back then.
No, I'm not the least bit surprised.
Yeah, they owned all the jukeboxes.
How was Bill Haley affected by, as things went on through the 60s, through psychedelic music and folk rock and all those kinds of things?
He didn't pay much attention to it, really. I tried because I was the youngest guy in the band, and I said, why don't you go back, why don't we do some country stuff? Because that's where he made it. I said, country music is very popular, and the audience is loyal. So why don't you do some country rock, original, get some of your stuff and do it with a country, he wouldn't do it. He says, I'm not going to go rest on my laurels. Whatever that meant.
You talk while resting on his laurels. You said that he started off being a yodeler in a kind of
Yeah.
yodeling band.
Yeah, and he was a championship, and he wouldn't yodel. I even said to go on the show and surprise the audience and do a yodeling number. I said that would go over great because they wouldn't expect it. He wouldn't do it.
Really?
I don't know why he wouldn't do it, but he wouldn't do it. I did get him to do I Can't Stop Loving You. He did that. He loved that song, and he did it on every show and got a great response from it. He did do that song. And in the dressing room, we would sit and just play, and he would do all these country songs, great songs, Hank Williams songs and all this stuff, and do them, and sang great. And I said, why don't you go on the stage and do a Hank Williams song? Why not?
Why not?
He said, no, because I'm not going to go back to that time. You know, it's rock and roll now. I said, but it's changing in country. And the very last recording session I did with him was a song called I Got to Memphis, which was written by Tom T. Hall. So he did the song. We did it in one take. And of course he was mad about that. And the producer said, nope, you did it exactly right. We don't need you to do it again. And he got an offer from that song to become a regular on the Grand Ole Opry. To do a rock and roll. He said, well, you do a rock and roll song and a country song. He didn't do it because he thought he owed the IRS a lot of money, and he was afraid he was going to get nabbed. Later, I found out after he died, the IRS owed him money. So he wouldn't have gotten, and he passed that opportunity up, because at that time, Jerry Lee Lewis was on the Grand Ole Opry, and so was Conway Twitty. They were doing things on. I said,
and what year was that approximately?
I know the year was 69.
Really?
1969.
So
Yep.
even though the folk rock and acid rock and the psychedelic thing had kicked in, and the Beatles had blown the songwriting market wide open, along with Bob Dylan and the Rolling Stones and Beach Boys, etc., Jimi Hendrix, he still had a solid following.
Yeah, he
Haley
did.
and Bill and Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah, and especially in Europe. Europe, he was still, well, we went back to Europe several times and had packed houses. And in the American pop scene is, what have you done this week? You know? Mm-hmm. Except for country. And when he made this country song, the interesting side effect of that is that I was the only one left on the record, because then they had 10-track, and it was starting to go digital, right? Bill was left, I was left. They changed every musician on the track, brought in other musicians, brought in harmonica, brought in vocal back, and it sounded more like a Glenn Campbell song, which was popular at that time. So when he heard it, Bill was furious. He said, that's not the way it sounded in the studio. And I said, it's great. I think it sounds great. It's very today. He says, I hate it. It went to number 10 in the charts, in the country charts.
And then he learned to love it.
No, he
still hated it.
Never did it. Well, at least the shows I did, which were few, he never did it live. He never did it. I don't know. He never did the song. And I asked the regular players, I said, did he ever did that How I Got to Memphis? He said, no, we never did it. He had a number 10 song in the country charts and never did it live. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. But it's my favorite song that he's ever done. Have you ever heard it?
I have never heard it, no.
Listen to it. And he did it in one take, because he's naturally a country artist. He's naturally a country artist.
So he had no animosity. Elvis had animosity toward the Beatles and a lot of the English groups.
No,
that he was
no.
sideswiped by them.
Bill loved the Beatles. In fact, what's the song that has "Turn Me On When I'm Getting Lonely"?
She's a woman.
She's a woman. He loved it. He would sing it in the bus when we were in Europe. Baby, don't. And we said, do the song. He said, no, that's a Beatles song. You know,
that would be good for him. He would cover that well.
Yeah, and he go, turn me on when I get. Let's do the song. Let's do it. It's a simple chord changes. Just do it. Surprise the audience and do a Beatles song. No, I don't know why. But off stage, he would do all these other artists' songs. and he would never do them on stage. I don't know why. I couldn't enhance them on, and backstage in the dressing room, we would sing all these songs. I said, why don't you go up and surprise him?
So he would
To
just
do
do
a
it
Rolling
on
Stones. He
standards.
likes Satisfaction. I said, go up and we'll do that Satisfaction. Bill Haley, the guy that started rock and roll, doing British songs. He says, nah. He says, no, that's their song. I don't want to take their song. I don't know why. And yet he let me do the latest songs. I'd go up and do Johnny Rivers. I'd go up and do Chuck Berry. He would let other people in the band do covers, but he wouldn't do it. Because I think some way he thought he was demeaning himself by doing that.
So what would he do? In 1969, what would he play? Same things he played in the 50s?
Yeah, but he would do Crying Time. He did that, and he'd do Ray Charles. I loved Ray Charles. He would do some Ray Charles stuff. Loved Ray Charles, and he'd do a couple of those tunes. But basically, the other guys in the band, like Billy Williamson, would do Joe Turner. He would do Feeling Happy, and he would do what's the other big Joe Turner song? Shake, Rattle, and Roll. He would do some of Joe Turner's verses, but Bill wouldn't do them. But he would not cover anybody except Ray Charles. It's the only one that he did cover song. Be off stage, he would sing other people's songs. He'd sing Buck Owens. He would sing.
Buck Owens, I could see him covering.
Yeah, and he loved Hank Williams.
Was he ever on Hee Haw?
And not while I was with the band. No.
Smothers Brothers?
No. We did Ray Anthony. We did Dick Clark. We did a lot of shows, but I don't remember being on Hee Haw. No. Again, he had this thing about going back to country. They'll think of me as a country artist, and I said, Bill, that's what you really are. He said, but I went away from that.
But didn't we start off this discussion about how country and rock and blues
Yeah.
are really all very closely related styles in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Now, I want to clarify, he's from Philadelphia, is that correct?
Well, he was born, I think, in Michigan, but he lived in
You're
lived
kidding?
outside.
Bill Haley's born in Michigan?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I may be wrong, but he was born. He didn't live long there. He moved to the Philadelphia area all of his life. I don't know if it's Michigan or not. I'm sorry, and forgive me. I was a comment. I think, but it's not Philadelphia. He didn't live there long, but he really didn't see. And forgive me, he really didn't see the connection. It was Billy Williamson that saw the connection. His steel guitar player of all people said, "Bill, it's almost the same. It's almost the same. They use 1-4-5 changes. We use 1-4-5 changes. That all they're doing is putting a beat behind, a different kind of beat and different kinds of. All we have to do is bring some black musicians into the session, and the flavor will be there.
The swing.
Yeah,
the undefinable swing.
Yeah, it'll be the country and the black mixed, and it happened that no one knew what to call it. So Alan Freed named it rock and roll. And
you're correct. Highland Park, Michigan.
Right, Highland Park, Michigan. He was born in Michigan.
Wow,
yeah.
I never knew that.
So, but it's, he came from a working class family, and he tried to make money by playing guitar and yodeling, and he got to be well known as a yodeler. Look up Bill Haley and the Saddlemen. I mean, hey, I think what's called yodeling blues, and I heard it, and it blew me away that he was that good, and he never would yodel later. He would never do it. I tried to get him to do it. Billy Williamson tried to get him to do it.
But all you guys took turns singing.
Yeah, he would not do the whole show. When we do a whole show, I would do kind of the quote latest stuff, and then Bill Williamson would do some of the other stuff, some of the Joe Turner stuff, and in fact he and I did together on a show live on a stage. Do you want to be happy for the rest of your life? B and Billy did that song, and it was out. Never call pretty woman your wife. Remember that song? If you want to be happy for the rest of your life, never make a pretty woman your wife.
I've never heard that.
Never
For the
heard that.
personal,
I've never heard
and they the joke, and in the record they did a little skit in the middle that says, why don't you marry a pretty woman? Because she'll leave me. Oh, okay. But we expanded on that, Billy, who was a great, he said, let's expand on that joke. So in the middle of the song, the beat would go and say, hey, Billy, he said, John, never marry a pretty woman. He said, why? He says, might leave you. You know, and then, never mind, why don't you, won't an ugly woman leave you too? He said, yeah, but who cares? And the people loved that. And we would do skits. We did Rocky Ray Fink, in which the bass player, Al Rappa, was a beaten up, punch drunk fighter. And we would do a skit. So we would put some vaudeville into the act, you know? So it became a show. We were a show band on the roof. And Bill did his 4 or 5 hits, and the rest of it was like a show.
So he didn't really play all that much. I mean,
he played on the stage, but he did like 4 or 5 vocals.
So even all these sketches and skits and other people's material, if you would sing, he'd play along with you.
Yeah, he'd be on the stage.
Okay.
Once in a while we'd leave, but he would be there, and sometimes he'd throw in some lines. He was great an entertainer, but for some reason
He didn't want to branch out.
No, he didn't want to branch out. He didn't want to change with the times. You know, he really didn't want to change with the times. And some things, you know, heavy metal, he was not that.
No, obviously.
But country rock, I'm saying, like, you know, and I kept saying, Bill, rock and roll is the country's going towards rock and roll. Can't you see it's going that way? Go that way with it. And he wouldn't do it. Anything else that I may have told you at some time that I've forgotten?
I'm kind of going like, I can't think of anything in detail. So when did you leave the Bill Haley's?
I left him in December of '66, but I didn't really leave. I was tired of traveling because the agent we had, Jolly Joyce Agency, would book us. The last tour I was on, we were in Texas playing for a debutante's coming out party, right? In Houston. And 2 days later, we had to be in Vancouver. And we drove it.
You drove it.
We drove it day and night.
You guys took shifts, is that it?
That's it. We took
did
like
you
4-hour drifts, stop, and we call it McDonald it. We stopped at McDonald's to get, you know, to eat and go to the bathroom and just keep driving. And then we played a week in Vancouver, and I had it. I'd say, I don't want to do this, because then it wasn't fun anymore. And then I drove home from Vancouver. Me and Rudy drove from Vancouver back to Chester, trying to staying ahead of a snowstorm. And I guess if you look back at the records, on Christmas Eve, 1966, there was 12 inches of snow, and we just beat it. We got as far as Reading, PA, when it caught up to us. But Bill would still call me to do record sessions and do the really big shows. I did the rock and roll show in Wimbledon, London.
That was in the early 70s.
That was early 70s, yeah. I was already with another band, but I left to do that. That was an interesting story, because on that show, the promoter had us, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, but before us, a bunch of English groups came on. We didn't get into it later, and they made a film out of it called The Rock and Roll Show. And in that show, in the wings, I met Mick Jagger, who was there with his wife Bianca. So I just said hello, and we had a 45-minute conversation.
What'd you talk about? Do you even remember?
You know, we really talked about the British scene, like how hard it was to play in Britain, and people being drunk. And he said, wasn't for you guys, we would probably still be playing bars. He says, well, we became rock and roll and blues, he says, and the Americans liked it so much that we became popular. He says, but if it wasn't for us feeding back the American music back to the Americans, you know, the U.S., he says, we would have ended. And he also said, I don't see myself playing rock and roll when I'm 50. Of course, we know. Yeah. He did. And I took a bunch of photographs. This is an interesting thing. I took a bunch of photographs because I was a Billy Williamson again. My mentor got me taking home videos and photographs. So I photographed him, Bianca, Rod Stewart, all the guys backstage just eating sandwiches. I took black and white photographs. I mean, tons of pictures of everybody, you know, from the side, and because we only did 4 songs, and so we listened to everybody else when they were on. And the closer was Chuck Berry. He closed the show. And electricity went off And in the long version, I think you see that. Short version, they cut off all the English acts. The Screaming Lord, such and so forth that came. But they stuck around to hear us. So I have photographs of all these English bands, English groups, I'm trying to think of who else was there. Who was the English group that did surf music? I'm trying to think. They were instrumental. Anyway, I took the film in to be developed, and it was lost. I took it to a place I trusted to develop it, and they said, "Sorry, we lost the film." Right. So I don't have any of that documentation.
Wow.
None of it. And that was, I still think about that. Wow, what did I have? What did I have? I had
It's a coffee table book.
yeah, I had all those pictures that I never. I wish digital was in, but you had to send them in, and someone ops said probably looked at the developing and said, "Wow, there's Chuck Berry, there's Bo Diddley, there's Bill Haley, there's
Little Richard was there as well.
Little Richard." Oh, Little Richard was obnoxious.
Really? You said that Bill Haley pulled a prank on him in an elevator. Something about that?
Oh, that was before that. We were in 62 or 63. I'm not sure. We were in England a lot. We were in the Russell Square Hotel, and who walks in the door but Little Richard? And Bill Haley and I, we were downstairs in the lobby, and we were going to go upstairs, and luckily in my studio I have a picture with Little Richard. The day he came back, and Bill asked him, "Why are you going back to music?" He says, "Because there ain't no money in preaching. I want to get back where the money is." So we got a picture with us, and our British fan club president, Hugh McCullum, was in it. And we got on the elevator, and Bill was a prankster. So we were on the second